Are you familiar with that feeling when you walk into a stranger's house and somehow know exactly where they keep the coffee mugs? Or when you meet someone for the first time but feel like you're picking up a conversation from 20 years ago? Your rational mind dismisses it, but something deeper recognizes a truth your consciousness can't quite grasp. For over 4 millennia, cultures worldwide have documented these experiences. Ancient Egyptian texts describe the soul's journey between lives. Hindu traditions map the continuation of consciousness across lifetimes. Even Plato argued that learning was actually remembering what the soul already knew. These weren't primitive superstitions. They were sophisticated frameworks explaining why certain places, people, and experiences feel hauntingly familiar. What you're experiencing isn't a coincidence or wishful thinking. It's your soul's memory breaking through the veil of your current incarnation. There are 9 distinct signs that indicate you've lived before. These patterns are so consistent that they appear in every culture that studied reincarnation. Your deepest fears, inexplicable talents, and strongest attractions might finally make sense. Let's explore what your soul has been trying to tell you. Imagine an experienced swimmer who has spent countless hours in pools, lakes, and even the ocean. He knows the statistics. Drowning is far less likely than a car accident. His rational mind understands water safety, proper techniques, and even lifeguard protocols. Yet when he peers into deep, dark water, something primal takes hold. His chest tightens, his breathing becomes shallow, and every fiber of his being screams danger. Despite his logical understanding that he's perfectly safe, this disconnect between what we know and what we feel reveals something profound about human consciousness. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, analytical part of your brain, processes information at one speed, while your amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system, processes emotional and survival data at a stunningly faster rate. When fear strikes without a logical foundation, you're experiencing something that bypasses conscious reasoning entirely. Consider the example of a successful architect who designs skyscrapers yet becomes physically ill when looking down from his own second-story office window. He's never fallen, never witnessed a traumatic fall, and intellectually appreciates heights from an engineering perspective. Or a confident public speaker who breaks into a cold sweat at the sight of closed elevator doors despite never having been trapped anywhere. These aren't just quirks. They're glimpses into memories that transcend our current lifetime. Neuroscience has discovered that trauma creates what researchers call somatic memories, experiences encoded in our nervous system that exist independently of conscious recollection. Groundbreaking research shows how the body literally keeps score of traumatic experiences, storing them in ways that can trigger intense physical responses years or even decades later. But what happens when these responses have no origin in our current life experience? Certain phobias appear with remarkable consistency across cultures and individuals who share no common experiences. Thalassophobia, that bone-deep terror of deep water, manifests identically whether someone grew up in Kansas or coastal California. The fear isn't of water itself, but specifically of dark, deep water where the bottom disappears from view. Past life researchers have documented thousands of cases where this particular terror connects to drowning experiences in previous incarnations, often involving shipwrecks, floods, or accidents near bodies of water. Acrophobia presents another fascinating pattern. While a fear of extreme heights makes evolutionary sense, many people experience paralyzing terror at relatively modest elevations. Second-story windows, low bridges, or even stepladders. The fear often involves a specific sensation of falling backward or losing control, accompanied by vivid mental imagery that feels more like memory than imagination. Regression therapists frequently uncover past life deaths involving falls from cliffs, towers, or buildings. In these cases, claustrophobia offers perhaps the most compelling evidence for soul memory. The terror of enclosed spaces often comes with surprisingly specific details. A fear of being underground, a panic about running out of air, or a terror of being unable to escape upward. These precise fears align remarkably with past life memories of being buried alive, trapped in collapsed mines, or imprisoned in small spaces. But unexplained fears extend far beyond classic phobias. You might feel inexplicably uncomfortable with certain historical periods. Perhaps Renaissance art makes you uneasy, or documentaries about the Civil War trigger anxiety you can't explain. Some people experience physical revulsion towards specific objects that pose no logical threat. Antique medical instruments, particular types of uniforms, or even certain architectural styles. Auditory triggers prove especially revealing. The sound of marching boots, church bells at specific times, or particular musical instruments can provoke intense emotional responses in people with no relevant current life associations. To explore your own patterns, it's helpful to keep a kind of soul fear diary. When you notice an unexplained emotional reaction, document the specific trigger, your physical sensations, and any images or thoughts that arise. Pay attention to the details. Is it all water that bothers you, or specifically moving water? Do all heights disturb you, or only certain types of elevated spaces? Past life phobias often feel ancient and immutable. Unlike current life fears, which you can usually trace to specific experiences, they frequently resist traditional therapeutic approaches because their roots are not in accessible memories. The healing process begins with recognition. When you acknowledge that your unexplained fear might originate from a past life trauma, something shifts in your relationship to that fear. You're no longer a victim of an inexplicable weakness. You're a soul who survived something difficult enough to leave an imprint across lifetimes. Remember, carrying these deep fears doesn't indicate weakness or dysfunction. If anything, it suggests a soul brave enough to have lived through intense experiences across multiple lifetimes. Your unexplained phobias might be medals of courage from battles you fought long ago, now ready to be honored and released so you can live more freely in this incarnation. Last night you dreamed you were standing in a cobblestone courtyard, rain soaking through your woolen cloak. You knew exactly where the baker's shop was around the corner and could smell the familiar scent of coal smoke mixed with bread. When you woke, you realized you'd never been to Europe and had never seen cobblestones like that. Yet the dream felt more real than your actual memories from yesterday. This isn't your typical anxiety dream about showing up to work naked or falling off a cliff. These are dreams that make you question the very nature of memory itself. Dreams so vivid, so consistently detailed that they feel less like imagination and more like watching home movies from a life you can't quite place. Some neuroscientists have spent decades studying what they call historically consistent dream sequences. Their research began when their own patients started reporting dreams that followed a logical timeline across multiple nights. Not random dream logic, but coherent narratives spanning months or even years of someone else's life. The scientific explanation for why past life memories might surface during sleep centers on how our brain processes information when we're unconscious. During REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex, our brain's internal fact-checker and reality filter, becomes less active. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, which stores long-term memories, becomes hyperactive. Past life dreams have distinct characteristics that separate them from regular dreams. They typically occur in chronological sequence, sometimes spanning months or years of dream time. The settings remain geographically and historically consistent. You aren't suddenly in ancient Egypt one night and medieval Scotland the next. The emotional relationships feel genuine and complex, carrying the weight of shared history rather than the shallow connections common in regular dreams. The emotional component of these dreams often proves most convincing to experiencers. Unlike regular dreams that fade quickly, the feelings from past life dreams can linger for hours or days. You might wake up grieving for children who aren't yours, feeling homesick for places you've never seen, or carrying guilt about decisions you never made in this lifetime. Sometimes the unexplained fears we discussed earlier are directly connected to these dream narratives. A woman with an inexplicable terror of drowning might repeatedly dream of a past life ending in a shipwreck. A man with claustrophobia might experience dreams of being trapped in a collapsed mine shaft. The dreams don't just show random scenes, they often reveal the origin stories of our current life patterns. It's helpful to keep a detailed dream journal focused specifically on historically consistent dreams. Write immediately upon waking before the logical mind starts editing. Note specific details: architectural styles, clothing, food, technology, social customs, names, geographical features. The skeptical perspective suggests these dreams might be psychological rather than literal memories. Symbolic representations of current life issues or creative combinations of historical information we've absorbed unconsciously. This explanation has merit, and honestly, the source matters less than the insights these dreams provide about our current patterns and relationships. But here's what makes the memory theory compelling. These dreams often provide specific, verifiable historical information that the dreamer couldn't have easily accessed through normal means. Mozart was 5 years old when he composed his first symphony. Not learned to play the piano, not picked out simple melodies. He composed a complete, sophisticated orchestral work that professional musicians today study with reverence. When you really think about that, it defies everything we understand about human learning and development. We've all seen those viral videos of toddlers sitting down at pianos and playing complex pieces they've supposedly never heard before, or children who speak fluent languages despite never having been exposed to them. The medical establishment calls this the savant phenomenon or attributes it to genetic predisposition. But what if there's something deeper happening here? The neuroscience of skill acquisition tells us that complex abilities develop through repetition and practice. When you learn to play the guitar, your brain forms new neural pathways connecting your motor cortex to your muscle memory. Each time you practice a chord progression, those pathways strengthen. Mastery comes from literally rewiring your brain through thousands of hours of deliberate practice. But here's where it gets fascinating. What if some of those neural pathways already exist when we're born? Research on cellular memory has revealed that our cells can store information beyond what we traditionally consider conscious memory. Think about your own life for a moment. Are there skills that came to you with unusual ease? This isn't about general talents like being good with numbers or having a musical ear. It's about specific complex abilities that felt familiar the moment you encountered them. Maybe you picked up a particular instrument and found your fingers naturally knowing where to go despite never having formal training. Perhaps you walked into a woodworking shop and instinctively understood how to use tools in ways that surprised even experienced craftsmen. These experiences often come with emotional components that distinguish them from ordinary learning. There's a sense of coming home, of remembering rather than discovering. The key difference between general aptitude and potential past life skill carryover lies in the specificity and the emotional resonance. Past life skills often manifest with particular cultural knowledge or historical context that doesn't match your current background. You might find yourself naturally understanding medieval European blacksmithing techniques or instinctively knowing how to prepare traditional dishes from cultures you've never studied. Pay attention to what feels mysteriously familiar to you. Try activities that inexplicably draw you in. Medieval crafts, traditional cooking methods, historical martial arts, ancient musical instruments. Notice the difference between learning something new and remembering something forgotten. The recognition of these carried forward talents isn't just personally empowering. It suggests that our abilities and inclinations aren't accidents. They might be carefully cultivated gifts developed over multiple lifetimes and brought forward to serve specific purposes in this incarnation. That unexplained mastery you've always wondered about might not be a genetic lottery win, but a skill you've spent lifetimes perfecting, now ready to be awakened and shared with the world. Picture this. You're sitting in a cafe when suddenly you overhear a conversation in what sounds like German. Without any conscious thought, you find yourself understanding fragments. Not just individual words, but the emotional undertone, the cultural context behind their discussion of a family gathering. Yet you've never studied German a day in your life. This isn't your imagination running wild or some lucky guessing game. You might be experiencing xenoglossy, one of the most puzzling phenomena that researchers believe could indicate memories from previous lifetimes. Xenoglossy is the ability to speak, understand, or write in recognizable human languages that you've never learned through conventional means. We're talking about real languages with proper grammar, cultural idioms, and contextual understanding that would be nearly impossible to fake convincingly. The scientific community approaches xenoglossy with healthy skepticism, and rightly so. But some documented cases are so compelling that they've forced even the most rigid researchers to wonder. Here's what makes xenoglossy particularly fascinating from a linguistic standpoint. True language use isn't just about vocabulary. You need grammar structures, syntax rules, cultural idioms, and contextual understanding that develops through years of immersion. When someone suddenly demonstrates these complex linguistic competencies without any learning history, it challenges our fundamental understanding of how language acquisition works. Researchers have identified two distinct types of xenoglossy. Responsive, which involves actually understanding and responding appropriately to questions or conversations in an unknown language, and recitative, which is more limited and involves the recitation of words or phrases without necessarily understanding their meaning. If you've experienced anything that might be xenoglossy, here's what to pay attention to. Notice words, phrases, or sounds in foreign languages that feel strangely familiar. Not just pleasant, but familiar in a way that suggests recognition rather than novelty. Pay attention to your emotional responses to different languages or dialects. Sometimes people report feeling inexplicably drawn to or comforted by languages they've never studied. Document any instances where you seem to understand languages you haven't learned, even if it's just catching the emotional tone or general meaning of conversations. You're walking through the halls of a museum, passing exhibit after exhibit with polite interest. Then suddenly you turn a corner and freeze. Your breath catches. Your heart starts racing. Before you stands a display of ancient Celtic artifacts, and something deep inside you whispers, "I remember this." Not intellectually. You've never studied Celtic culture, but every fiber of your being recognizes something profound, something that feels like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. This isn't cultural appreciation or academic fascination. This is cultural DNA, the soul's recognition of home in what should be foreign lands. This phenomenon has been witnessed countless times. The American businessman who breaks down crying the first time he hears Gregorian chanting, despite being raised Methodist. The Japanese student who feels inexplicably at peace in the Scottish Highlands, understanding somehow that those rolling hills hold pieces of her story. The city-raised accountant who visits Machu Picchu and immediately knows, without any guide or explanation, exactly how the ancient ceremonies were conducted. What separates cultural soul memory from simple interest is the visceral, immediate recognition. The manifestations of cultural soul memory are remarkably consistent across cases. There's the immediate comfort with unfamiliar social customs. Then there's the emotional resonance with cultural music and art. These aren't random cultural attractions. They follow patterns that suggest deeper connections. People drawn to ancient Egypt often report dreams of life along the Nile, an instinctive knowledge of hieroglyphic meanings, or an unexplained understanding of mummification processes. Those connected to medieval European culture frequently demonstrate an immediate familiarity with feudal social structures, herbal medicine practices, or the architectural principles of cathedrals they've never formally studied. But here's what's crucial to understand: these connections aren't always pleasant. Cultural soul memory can also manifest as inexplicable fears or aversions. The woman who feels terror in French chateaus despite loving French culture. The man who becomes physically ill around Spanish colonial architecture but feels drawn to pre-Columbian ruins. These reactions often point to traumatic past life experiences within those cultural contexts. Want to explore your own cultural connections? Start with museum visits, but pay attention to your body's responses, not just your mind's interest. Notice which exhibits make your heart race, which artifacts you want to touch, which displays you find yourself studying far longer than others. Try traditional foods from various cultures, not just whether you like the taste, but whether certain flavors feel familiar, comforting, or emotionally significant. Listen to world music with intention. Put on Mongolian throat singing, Irish fiddle music, West African drumming, Indian ragas. Which genres move you to tears? Which make you want to dance despite never learning the steps? Which create that inexplicable sense of homecoming? You walk into a building you've never seen before, yet somehow you know exactly where the bathroom is. 3 doors down, second left. You meet someone for the first time, but their laugh triggers a wave of familiarity so intense it takes your breath away. You visit a new city and find yourself navigating back streets like you grew up there, knowing which corner will reveal the old church before you even turn. Most people dismiss these moments as simple déjà vu, just neurons misfiring in the temporal lobe. But what if cutting-edge neuroscience is revealing something far more intriguing? What if these glitches in reality are actually your soul recognizing people, places, and experiences from previous lifetimes? There are different types of these experiences, and each might represent a different window into past life memory. Déjà vu, already seen, is just the beginning. There's déjà entendu, that uncanny feeling of having heard specific words or music before. Déjà vécu goes deeper, the sensation of having lived through an entire sequence of events. And déjà visité, perhaps the most compelling for past life researchers, involves detailed familiarity with places you've never been. Neuropsychiatrist Vernon Knepp, who spent decades studying these phenomena, discovered something remarkable when he compared ordinary déjà vu with what he calls subjective déjà vu experiences. Regular déjà vu typically lasts seconds and involves vague familiarity, but the intense experiences that suggest past life connections are entirely different animals. The emotional component is also telling. While regular déjà vu feels mildly interesting, past life déjà vu often carries intense emotional content that seems completely disproportionate to the current situation. Neuroscientist Dr. Akira O'Connor at the University of St. Andrews has been mapping what happens in our brains during these experiences. His research shows that intense déjà vu activates not just the temporal lobe, but also the frontal cortex, the area responsible for conflict monitoring and decision-making. It's as if the brain is trying to reconcile 2 different sets of memories, one from this lifetime and another from somewhere else entirely. The predictive element makes these experiences even more fascinating. Unlike regular déjà vu, which involves recognizing something that's already happened, past life déjà vu often includes knowledge of what's about to occur. This perspective transforms déjà vu from a curious neurological glitch into something far more meaningful, a form of cellular memory that helps us recognize the people we're meant to love, the places we're meant to visit, and the experiences we're meant to have for reasons that extend far beyond this single lifetime. Your body might be keeping a record of experiences your mind has forgotten entirely. Consider this. A child is born with a distinctive birthmark shaped like a jagged line across their throat. Years later, during past life regression therapy, they recall being executed by a sword in medieval times. The location matches perfectly. A coincidence? Perhaps. But when you start examining the documented cases, a fascinating pattern emerges. Dr. Ian Stevenson, the late University of Virginia psychiatrist, spent decades documenting over 3,000 cases of children who claimed to remember previous lives. What made his research extraordinary wasn't just the memories these children reported. It was the physical evidence their bodies carried. Birthmarks and birth defects that corresponded precisely to fatal wounds described in their past life memories, often verified through historical records. But body memory extends far beyond birthmarks. Your cells might be storing information in ways science is only beginning to understand. Organ transplant recipients have reported profound changes after surgery, suddenly craving foods they previously disliked, developing new artistic abilities, or experiencing memories that seem to belong to someone else entirely. This suggests that memory isn't confined to the brain alone. If our cells can retain information from organ donors, what else might they remember across the longer journey of multiple lifetimes? Your chronic pain might be telling a story your conscious mind doesn't know. That persistent lower back ache that no doctor can fully explain could be echoing an old battle wound. The recurring tension in your shoulders might remember carrying heavy loads across ancient trade routes. You walk into a room full of strangers, and across that space, your eyes meet someone you've never seen before. But something impossible happens. Your entire body responds as if you're seeing someone you've been waiting for your whole life. Your heart races, your breath catches, and every cell in your being screams, "I know you." There's no logical explanation. You've never met this person. Yet the recognition is so profound, so undeniable, that it feels like you're picking up a conversation that began centuries ago. This is soul recognition, and it's one of the most compelling signs that your consciousness has lived before. When we encounter certain people, we're not just meeting them for the first time. We're reuniting with souls who have traveled alongside us through multiple lifetimes, playing different roles in an eternal dance of growth, learning, and evolution. The phenomenon goes far beyond simple attraction or compatibility. Soul recognition creates an immediate sense of coming home, of finding a missing piece you didn't even know was lost. You might find yourself sharing your deepest thoughts with someone you met an hour ago, or feeling completely comfortable in a silence that would be awkward with anyone else. But here's where it gets fascinating. Soul connections aren't always pleasant. Sometimes you'll meet someone and feel an immediate, intense dislike that seems completely disproportionate to anything they've actually done. You might find yourself in a power struggle with a coworker that feels like life or death, when objectively it's just about office supplies. These challenging connections often represent what researchers call karmic relationships, bonds formed to resolve conflicts or debts from previous lifetimes. Understanding karmic relationships can transform your most difficult connections. That family member who pushes all your buttons might be helping you develop patience and forgiveness. The romantic partner who broke your heart might have been teaching you about self-worth and independence. There's something profoundly unsettling about walking through modern life, feeling like you're wearing clothes that don't quite fit, not physically but existentially. You look around at the world everyone else seems to navigate effortlessly, and something deep within you whispers, "This isn't home." If you've experienced that persistent sense of displacement, You're likely familiar with what could be called the eternal outsider syndrome. It goes far beyond typical generational differences or personal quirks. This is a bone-deep recognition that your soul remembers other times, other places, other ways of being human. This displacement manifests in fascinating ways. You might find yourself inexplicably drawn to historical periods that feel more real than your current life. Not just academically interested in them, but feeling a pull so strong it's almost gravitational. You watch documentaries about medieval villages or Native American tribal life, and something in your chest tightens with recognition and loss. The modern dating world might feel impossibly shallow when your soul remembers lifetimes of arranged marriages that grew into profound partnerships, or communities where relationships were supported by extended networks, rather than two people trying to be everything to each other. Here's what's particularly important to understand. This displacement isn't a problem to be fixed. It's information to be honored. Souls who feel fundamentally out of step with current times often incarnated specifically to serve as bridges between past wisdom and present needs. You're not broken. You're remembering. Think about the global challenges we're facing: environmental crisis, social fragmentation, spiritual emptiness, unsustainable economic systems. Who better to help navigate these issues than souls who remember when humans lived differently? When communities were intact, when people understood their connection to natural cycles, when spiritual practice was woven into daily life rather than compartmentalized into weekend activities. Your anachronistic values aren't outdated. They're timeless.